Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to another episode of Slidin into my DMs, and welcome to all of my DMs. We have joining us as usual, Corey, Mr. Rogers, and Preston, who is not using a green screen today, just wearing a Timo hat, apparently.
Back you up here. Look up here, not back there.
And so let's see. Mr. Rogers has moved from Neuschwanstein to Saint Michel.
Yeah.
Is there a reason? Did you get out of Barovia? Congratulations.
I did. Yeah. I just got tired of the cold, and the power of will is all you need to get out of Barovia.
So don't spoil the ending.
That's good to know. When we start our Strahd campaign up again, I'll have to keep that in mind. Corey, tell me about your little background there.
Oh, so this is a house for the next homebrew campaign that I'm making. It's the crest for the House of Whisper Silk. So
the House of Whisper Silk. So minor, not spoiler, but we've been talking. A lot of you have been requesting that we record our campaigns and put them up on YouTube. And we keep saying, we're working on something, we'll get there, just, hang tight. And that continues to be the case. We've got a couple of things to wrap up and some prep work to do. But yeah, Corey is hard at work at creating an entire world that he's been sharing bits and pieces of with us. And I don't know about you guys, I love the stuff that I've read so far. I'm getting super excited, trying to decide what character to create for it. I still don't know. There's so many to choose from.
Let your viewers decide.
No way, because they would all pick like a freaking
the Beast Barbarian.
Yeah. No, not. I'd be okay with that. They would go like they'd go like a wild magic garbage thing that would make me like roll on the wild magic table every time I made an attack, and I'd be like, oh, RNG, I hate this.
Yeah. And one thing to note is I'm developing the world in such a way that eventually we would be able to share it with everyone, and everybody can see the individual stuff. So I'm not quite at the level where I'm ready to reveal the location yet. I mean, if you're smart, you might be able to find it if you can find little breadcrumbs here and there. But needless to say, it's out there. Nice. Somebody could find it and stumble across it.
Okay, good to know. Well, let's jump into the things that I wanted to talk about today. So, as usual, I've got a quick ruling question, and as usual, it pertains to a video that I put out recently, and some questions that were raised as far as rulings are concerned. So, this week, for those who don't know, I put out a wizard mage video. Primarily an abjuration wizard with a little bit of armor and a single warlock dip. But anyway, we talked a lot about the arcane ward. That is an important aspect to what the abjuration wizard can do, right? The question was raised, or I sort of asserted that okay, this gets complicated. Even though Jeremy Crawford and actually the Sage Advice Compendium has indicated to us that resistance to damage does not affect the arcane ward. That is, the arcane ward does not benefit from any damage resistance that you as a character may have. My assertion was that possibly, probably, most likely, depending on how your DM rules, the heavy armor master feat, which gives you a flat reduction, not resistance, but a flat 3 reduction when you take damage, right, from non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage, that would apply before the arcane ward. In other words, the arcane ward wouldn't take that extra 3 damage because that's the reduction that you get, right? And so you'd apply the damage reduction first, then the arcane ward, then like temporary hit points, then you. And so my question is, do you think that's correct? Do you think that if you had heavy armor master feat and you were wearing heavy armor, that rules as written the ward would benefit from that damage reduction and take 3 less damage essentially, or that the ward would take full damage and then, you know, the damage reduction would apply to temporary hit points, as per Wizards of the Coast ruling. I have a feeling that I'm going to fight with you guys about this today, but let's hear it.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and start.
Yes.
I'll be super bad cop and say no,
Okay.
no, it will not. The Arcane Ward specifically says that it takes the damage instead of you.
Mm-hmm.
And Heavy Armor Master says that when you take damage
Mm-hmm.
that is slashing, piercing, and bludgeoning, it's reduced by 3. So you are not taking the damage. The Arcane Ward is taking the damage.
Okay. What do you think,
Agreed.
Mr. Rogers? Okay. What do
I
you think,
agree,
Preston?
and it says when it takes damage first. The Arcane Ward, it takes damage first,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think in order of operations, that takes damage, not you. So like Corey said, it doesn't apply.
Okay. What do you think, Preston? Come on, be a good cop. Come on, somebody in my corner. So the description of the Arcane Ward is as follows. Starting at 2nd level, you can weave magic around yourself for protection. When you cast an abjuration spell, a 1st level or higher, you use a strand of the spell's magic to create a magical ward on yourself that lasts until you finish a long rest. The ward has a hit point maximum, blah, blah, blah. Whenever you take damage, the ward takes the damage instead. If this damage is reduced, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, that's, I think, for the purposes of argument,
I mean,
that's the description.
with the description, when
Mhm.
it says I take damage, therefore I
Mhm.
would have received the damage before the ward, right?
Yes.
Because it says whenever you take damage. It doesn't say whenever the ward's hit. It says whenever you are hit and are taking damage.
Whenever you take damage, it takes damage instead.
I could see an argument going both directions. I would say raw, like if you're sitting at a table with Adventurers League or something,
Mhm.
probably not.
Okay.
At my table, I could see an argument for this working as kind of intended, because of the way that they have that worded. I'm on the fence, but to helpful, maybe be good cop there. I think that
So
I think I could be persuaded. Yes.
So here's why it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Okay. I guess my question is the Arcane Ward somehow like a separate entity than myself? Is it like this bubble that sort of like that sort of exists between my armor and, you know, the thing that's attacking me?
Is magic an extension of yourself?
If so, why does my armor class, why does my ward benefit from my armor class, right? From the armor that I'm wearing? Because if I don't get hit thanks to my plate mail armor that I'm wearing, right, the ward isn't taking damage. It's not like the sword is swinging, going through this magical barrier, hitting the armor and stopping there. The ward's not taking damage at that point, right? It benefits from my armor. It benefits from my armor class. It benefits from, for that matter, it benefits from my saving throws, right? Like if I dodge out of the way of a fireball, the ward is going to take less damage as a result, right? It seems like what I'm trying to sort of figure out in my head is like, you know, where does the ward exist, and why, how can it benefit from my armor but not from me being a heavy armor master, right?
Okay, counterpoint to that, how can it not benefit from your other resistances then?
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're
I think that's a valid question.
If you're going that way, first of all, this is a super technicality question that you pull on your GM, and they're going to have to make a ruling on it. That's going to affect a lot of gameplay moving forward.
Probably bring it up before the game,
yes.
outside of the match, so you're not watching play.
But I honestly don't think that if your GM is not going to allow resistances, then they shouldn't allow the heavy armor master. For what do you think heavy armor master exactly does? Like in a in-game technical standpoint, does it allow you to like absorb blows better? Does it allow you to like roll and deflect better?
Sure.
Like what is the technicality that you're using for the explanation for that feat?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in my mind it would be, you know, that you are really good at kind of whether it's moving in heavy armor or sort of angling, I don't know, you've got a pauldron on your shoulder and you're really good at, maybe you angle that pauldron in just the right way so that the blow sort of becomes a glancing blow that otherwise would have hit true, something like that. But it probably doesn't have to do with the physical armor itself, but maybe your ability to kind of maneuver in it, I guess, if I were guessing.
So in that case, I don't know if the ward is smart enough magic to distinguish a glancing blow from a non-glancing blow. So you could definitely argue that it still takes the full brunt of the damage, and anything else is, or you can even say, well, yeah, the ward is taking the damage. That's why the armor master is working. However, here's my compromise. If this is such an issue that your player hounds you about it constantly, say, okay, take a feat. Make up a new feat that says adaptive arcane ward, and it allows you to apply, maybe give your ward some extra HP, apply any resistances and damage reductions that you sustain to your ward as well.
I'm gonna keep pushing, and I apologize if you don't like this. Skip ahead, look at the timestamps, and skip ahead to the next. So here's the other thing about this that bothers me, right? Apparently, temporary hit points do benefit from resistance, right? Because they're somehow like part of your HP or whatever. This ward does not. The temporary hit points do. I mean, in this build, I'm casting Armor of Agathis, right? It's a warlock spell, and it gives you temporary hit points. Here's the description of that spell. A protective magical force surrounds you, manifesting as a spectral frost that covers you and your gear, right? I get temporary hit points as a result of this protective magical force that's surrounding me. For some reason, that protective magical force that surrounds me, benefits from my resistance. But the protective magical force that surrounds me as the arcane ward does not. To me, it's just there seems to be this logical inconsistency that bothers me. Here's something else that bothers me about this, and I did not know this until I looked it up in the Sage Advice Compendium. Okay, so it says, an arcane ward is not an extension of the wizard who creates it. It is a magical effect with its own hit points. Any temporary hit points, immunities, or resistances that the wizard has don't apply to the ward. Not just resistances then, but freaking immunities. If I'm immune to poison damage because I'm a Yuan-Ti pureblood, right? And somebody hits me with a poison attack, it might kill my ward, even though it's not going to do any damage to me. That makes me insane. Like, that seems, I mean, and so, okay, fine. Like, if you then are going to establish, look, this ward sort of exists outside of you, and it's just there to like absorb incoming damage, and it's not impacted by the armor that you're wearing, even though it is, because if my AC is high enough that the attack misses, then the ward's not going to take damage. So that's weird. But anyway, it sort of exists outside of you. Somebody hits you with a poison attack, even though you're immune to poison damage, the ward isn't immune to poison damage, so the ward's going to take damage. It's like, ugh, that's stupid. But then how come also, like, if I have this Armor of Agathis temporary hit points magical bubble around me, that does not get reduced because I have immunity to poison damage. So I don't know. I just feel like it's like, look, if you're going to give me whether it's temporary hit points or arcane ward, that's basically another form of temporary hit points, like let the rules work the same for both of them. And if there's damage resistance, then they apply to both.
You're right, Colby. You convinced me. Temporary hit points should not be part of resistances and immunities. Temporary hit points for my games from now on will be all on their own, and they're not going to benefit from any resistances or immunities. Congratulations.
Congratulations. You are such a baby that I'm, rather than listen to you any longer, I'm just going to give in.
I want to bring up a good point here. Okay. Going back a little bit to what Preston and Mr. Rogers were saying about changing the damage type or fudging the numbers and everything. And going back to a comment that I've seen on your videos where people are saying that their DM is basically invalidating their build with True Sight, right? Giving all of their monsters True Sight. And that bugs me so bad. Like how can you be so petty as a GM to be like, I am going to hit you, bear barbarian, with nothing but psychic damage for the rest of the campaign. You know, like it just it boggles my mind. And you know what? Fine. I'll agree with you. Arcane Ward should have resistances in your immunities and benefit from all this stuff.
I think I have a fix. I think I like Corey's option of the take a feat, but maybe as an alternative, if you don't want to do that, give the Arcane Ward its own AC. Just set an AC, give it its own AC, and let it be a force field. Right. That's like, okay, it's around you within 5 feet of you or whatever. Right. It moves where you move.
Then it behaves more like the items, right? So like if you're trying to hit a spear or a door or anything else, those have AC and hit points to them. So I think less of like you and more of like an object.
Yep, providing a custom magic item with an attunement that says that while you have this item, your Arcane Ward gains these extra abilities, including like immunity to poison damage, because a ward should not be able to be poisoned or diseased at all. Like it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, okay, I can get that. I can get behind that.
I like that. I like that, Mr. Rogers, because I feel like, right, it gets to the sort of part of the argument, which is like, okay, it either exists outside of me or it doesn't, right? Like, so if it somehow benefits from my armor class, but not from like my damage resistance, like that just feels like it's one or the other. You know what I mean?
I do want to keep in mind here what you brought up the other day about AC not just being your armor class, not just being your armor. It's also a combination of luck and dodging and glancing blows and all of that. Like something might hit your ward, but not be powerful enough to do damage to that ward.
Sure.
Or if you're a heavy armor master and you're really proficient at moving around and stuff, that AC is not necessarily, hey, my armor's
your armor's thicker.
It's that you can roll and you can, do the Dark Souls.
Rules is written. It doesn't benefit. Would you argue my ear off for it? And could you do that? Probably. I'd probably just like, I'm giving in after like 15 minutes of this. Like 2 days is going to break me.
People in the comments are going to be like, he didn't argue this hard for elven accuracy and custom lineage. He just rolled over for that one. Why is he picking this hill to die on? Anyway,
because it might be the next character. Who knows?
It might. Actually, we'll see. All right, let me get down off my soapbox here. Actually, I fear that I might want to retcon that later, because I have a feeling that I feel like I've sort of spent like any brownie points accrued or like political capital that I may have had with Corey. Like, and now later on in game, I'm going to be arguing for something and he's going to be like, no, I already said yes to the Arcane Ward thing. And I'll be like, I'm playing a monk. I don't care about the Arcane Ward. Like, let me have more key points.
You get one DM wish per game.
More key points. What the? No, we're not going to get into it.
Yes. Monks are way underpowered. They need more key points. All right. Here we go. So let's get into what we were actually going to spend most of the time talking about today, which is alignment, character alignment. And this is something that I've been thinking a lot about lately. And I don't know about you guys, Corey, maybe you have, since you've been sort of creating a world and probably populating it with NPCs and things like that. But I have a few questions that I want to talk with you guys about concerning character alignment, its usefulness, tips and tricks, how you think about alignment in game, how you think it could be used, or if it should be ignored, et cetera, et cetera. So let me start off with this. Do you view alignment as more of a tool to help your players and the NPCs and monsters in your world, for that matter, as a dungeon master, but as a tool to help them develop their personality and or motivations? Or do you think of it as more of a restriction that inhibits character development and maybe even leads to stereotyping, or something else? In short, how do you use alignment in your game? That's kind of broad, I know, but maybe we'll start broad and drill down into specific as we go. Who wants to start?
Why don't you go, Preston?
Okay. I'll take it off. Let's go.
No, don't take it off. Just tell us.
Leave it on.
Leave it on. Timo hat stays on.
I'm I'm gonna reel that one back in.
I'm not editing this, by the way. It's a stand.
Perfect.
Perks. Anyways, yeah. So when it comes to alignment, I feel like for me as a DM, I try and look at it as a way that I can help the players to get a little bit of a temperature of how they feel like they want to play that character, right? So if they come into the game and they say, "Hey, I'm a lawful good paladin," I have a pretty good assurance that they probably are wanting to play that character in that direction of, okay, I see evil and I'm going to stamp it out, and I'm going to, like that bad guy, I'm not going to actually kill him. I'm going to put him in manacles and put him before a judge, and like, so I'm gonna try and provide story elements that kind of correlate with that. That being said, I also like to take that and also give it a that ebb and flow, right? So if they are that type of character, put them in morally questionable situations from time to time that make them challenge and say, hey, is my point of view or the way that I'm doing this, am I the good guy? Like, or am I actually doing what is the law because what I am creating the law and I am the, justice incarnate kind of thing? Or is it because I'm actually trying to make the world a better place kind of thing? So
the record, my death cleric, my death cleric was lawful neutral, because I know that's what you're all thinking right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, continue.
So I don't want to use it as a restriction or a way to kind of box somebody in, but I do try and use it as a way to be like, hey, I've noticed the last couple, times that we've played, instead of doing XYZ, I've noticed that your characters started to drift into this. Maybe he's in a funk, or like instead of helping this town, you ended and burned it down to the ground. So maybe you're not quite as lawful good as you thought. Maybe you're more like a.
Okay, we'll put a pin in that, because I want to talk about sort of when characters go against their alignment a little bit later. But no, I think that'll be a nice segue. What do you think, Corey?
So I like alignment in the sense of it gives your character a good starting point. Mm-hmm. But there are so many moral gray areas that it doesn't really seem to me like the end all be all. I have a comic that used to run on D&D 3.5 as the rule set for the world, but one of the characters in it was a paladin, and she did some really questionable stuff, but kept her paladin powers up until straight out murdering a king, and then she lost that paladinhood. And even after she lost those powers, she wondered what she did wrong. Because in her eyes, she was doing nothing wrong. Like the bad guy can always see themselves as the hero. That sometimes makes your best villains is the one who's just like, oh, I'm doing this because it's what's best for everybody. To save the world. Mm-hmm. As far as like you said, I've been doing a lot of world building lately, and as far as alignment goes in my world, I haven't really touched on it. I don't really touch on it other than you have your alignment, great, good. If there's something that drastically changes that, then you can work that into your story. But otherwise, it's really your character, and however you want to play it. I'm not going to be there and be like, you're lawful neutral. Remember that when you're trying to decide whether to help this orphan or rob him. Exactly. Like it's yeah.
Okay. What do you think, Mr. Rogers?
I kind of agree with Corey. I actually really dislike alignment. I think it's a tool to help you start with your character, but I think it's just pretty archaic. I think it's restrictive. Like Corey mentioned, there's just so much like moral gray. There's just so much ambiguity with the character. I think the more important thing is maybe pick an alignment that matches with other people at your table, so you have like driven goals, so you're not constantly butting heads. But outside of using it as a launching point to create your character, I think motives, goals, flaws, quirks, those kind of things are way more important than what your alignment is when it comes to storytelling.
And if I'm not mistaken, it seems like you guys are kind of maybe all saying that alignment should be seen as something that's fluid, not static. Mm-hmm. That can kind of change and shift.
Yeah, I mean, as humans, we don't neatly fit into like these little boxes. We don't have a grid that we just are falling into.
Right,
it's much more than that.
More than just humans, okay?
Well,
there are others like
okay.
halflings, gnomes.
Yep.
Okay, them too.
No.
Them too.
I was
Well, and that's something else
Go ahead.
that as I've been making my world. Sorry, Colby, I don't mean
Oh,
to keep interrupting you, but that's what I'm here for, is to keep interrupting you. But my world is very much there are no bad races, right? Like I specifically talk about orcs a little bit in their racial profile of there's not bad orc. They're like, it's not all orcs are tribal barbarians and they're evil, you know, and all they do is hunt and pillage. It's no, there are good orcs out there and there's bad orcs, and it depends on your location, how you were raised, you know, a bunch of different factors, just like humans, you know, like, and I'm not saying that where you're raised determines whether you're bad or good or anything like that, but there are definitely factors that go into that are environmental and, you know, nature versus nurture type of thing.
Sure.
That kind of raise us all. And it seems ridiculous to me to be like, oh, you're a red dragon? Well, guess what? You're automatically evil.
Yes.
Enjoy.
And so there's so many ways that we could go here and things that I want to talk about. Like this might turn into a longer conversation than I initially feared. Okay, let's go back real quick to what Preston kind of started with, and you guys have alluded to. I mean, okay, can characters change their alignment? Seems like everybody feels yes. Should there be a penalty if they do? Like, you know, in previous versions of D&D, it used to be that, you know, if you are a paladin and your alignment changed, that posed a problem for you because you may be now in conflict with your deity, right? I mean, I remember in AD&D way back in the day, if I'm not mistaken, maybe my DM just made this up and forced it on us, but my memory is that if you changed your alignment, if you did something that made your DM go, you're not lawful good anymore, you had to actually fight like a version of yourself to like see who would win, and you'd have this like battle basically. It was like Scott versus Nega Scott, like, you know, like would like come out and you'd be like, oh shoot, like now there's like an evil version of me, and like let's see who wins. And like it was crazy, right? So maybe my question here is like, should there be a penalty if your alignment changes, or at the very least, shouldn't there be a penalty for because in 5e there isn't, right? Shouldn't there be a penalty for like a religious character whose alignment changes if their deity is chaotic good and they find themselves acting in a chaotic evil way? Shouldn't they like lose their cleric powers? Their god abandons them, or at least have to find a new god?
Yeah,
the
so
warlock goes and worships a god and gets powers from both of them. And
yeah, and then you've got a court battle on your hands. It's a whole big deal. No, so okay, in 3.5 you had to be lawful good to be a paladin, right? Mm-hmm. And if you ever shifted from that alignment, you immediately lost your paladin powers, and you were considered an equal level fighter in those levels, right? And that's a really cool idea. And then you had to like seek atonement and everything. Yeah. And I can see that working and working as something that you would want to speak with your GM about, or your GM would want to come to you after a game and be like, hey, you're doing some bad stuff. Let's talk about where that leads you. Do you find a god elsewhere? Do you want to try and atone? Like, where does your character want to go? However, the big problem, and going back to that whole comic strip that I read a lot, is the paladin would then try to thrust their alignment onto everybody else. Because if everybody else was being, you know, stealing around them and the paladin was just letting it happen, that's a threat to their alignment, because they may be lawful neutral now because they're not trying to be all good. And so they would try and police the party, and it would make for a bad game. And I think that's why they got rid of it in 5th edition. And it's more of a, hey, your GM might have consequences for this. That's up to them. But we're not going to penalize you for whatever your alignment is.
I think a penalty is a bit heavy. I think things might not go your way. You do something that's against the grain or against your character. Yeah, I mean, even if there's a really good reason why you did it, I think there should be some sort of story reason, some sort of story element that's maybe not a penalty, but something doesn't go how you thought story-wise. Like maybe you do lose your powers, but maybe that lines up perfectly with you. You are already going to be multi-classing a different direction. Maybe
you become an Oathbreaker now instead of you know, Oath of the Crown or whatever.
Exactly.
And that's definitely something that if you want to work that out at the beginning, you do with your GM.
Right.
Or if it's something that happens, your GM might have to come to you and be like, hey, your god's not going to be happy about this. How do you want to handle it? Do you want to atone right now? Do you want to go through a cool storyline where you lose your divine powers and you have to be, just a regular like battle master fighter for a little bit, or what?
Yeah. Preston, you were going to say something.
I was going to say the one thing that at least with the whole thing that kind of, to me, I have friction with, I guess, with the idea of alignment and having penalties, is that means basically we're saying clerics, paladins, maybe warlock,
maybe celestial warlock or something.
Those are the only people that are affected by being lawful good. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And so for me, I agree with, like, from a story element perspective, hey, if they start out with the god of medicine, maybe it's Dienrecht or whatever the name is from, I think it's Greek mythology. Or maybe they're changing to maybe they want to go to like the god of war, they want Ares, that can make it be a compelling story amount where they go and they say, okay, hey, I'm going to cast divine intervention, and maybe it succeeds, and for that one thing the goddess kind of comes down and says, look, this is the last time, like I'm warning you, like you're going completely against what I am asking you to do as a follower, and if you're going to be diametrically opposed, then I'm going to withdraw. And then maybe that withdrawal happens, and for one game they're like, oh crap, like what am I doing, like I can't do anything. And then after that, maybe a bad god or a different type of god kind of swings in and says, hey, you did a crappy job being a follower of this person, come follow me instead, come be follower Loki. Or
I guess my feeling is, I like the idea of not being locked into something, right? And being able to evolve as a character, right? In the way that you look at the world and the way that you interact with people, your companions, enemies. I mean, if you're sort of if you're too static, then that could make for bad storytelling, bad character development. But I think the flip side of that, there's maybe a compromise there, because I do also feel like if there are no consequences to actions, and if a player finds themselves like, if there's no conflict, internal struggle, right, as a player goes through this evolution and things like that, then that's a missed opportunity, I think, for a potentially good story moment as well. Okay, so speaking of kind of, I think Mr. Rogers, you kind of were hinting at this earlier, but having characters with conflicting alignment, right? I know that a lot of DMs just straight up don't allow evil players at their table, right? That's kind of their house rule or whatever. Do you think that's a good idea? Yes, no, why not?
Well, since you kind of called me out, I don't restrict it.
Sure.
Let's just say it just needs to make sense. Like, why would this evil person be hanging out with these lawful good people? What's the end game? Is it a betrayal at the end, or is it just, their goals align for a moment for this arc of the story? If you can give me a story reason why it makes sense, then sure, go ahead. I don't care if there's an evil character on the table. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends on why your character is evil, right? If you just want to be evil because it's fun and you want to kill something that without consequence, or you want to steal from your party, I'm going to say no, because that is going to cause conflict in the group. And obviously conflict is something we talked about in the last episode. Ping, whichever way.
Yes, over here.
But what you're going to end up with people who are upset with each other because one person is being an a-hole. But if somebody comes up and they say, hey, I want to be a lawful evil character, and I'm following the party around because our goals align, and then afterwards, we could have this cool moment of betrayal or something like that, I'm going to be like, okay, yeah, let's work this in. Maybe don't tell the other players that you're lawful evil, though, because that makes it more fun. Other than that, if you want to play an evil character, convince the rest of your party to play evil characters too. That's my caveat, because I don't want to deal with two sides of a coin that can't agree on anything when it's already like herding cats when you're all the same alignment.
What do you think, Preston?
Some of the stuff that Corey said was very similar to kind of what I was thinking as well. And I think that's one of the reasons why when I start a game, I don't want if when we start the game, I don't want people interested in saying, hey, my name is Corvax. I'm a lawful evil, blah, blah, blah. I rather them just say, hey, I'm Corvax. I'm a necromancer. I grew up in XYZ.
Why necromancer? What do you have against necromancers? Not all necromancers are evil.
Yeah.
Hey,
Or
hey,
I
you
would
know what?
say, like, maybe
Some
they don't even-
necromancers in some societies, they pay good money to the family, a stipend for them to be, you know, followers and to help them do their things.
So one thing that I like to do is I like to try and coax my players to avoid introducing themselves to the party by just their name, class, and race.
Yep.
Right?
I was just
Like,
about
give
to
me,
say that.
yeah, give me a description of what your character looks like, and you know,
How do
and
they
then
walk?
have everybody piece together like, oh, she's got a bow. Is she a ranger? Oh wait, she's also got this weird kind of like floral arrangement in her hair. Is she a druid with a bow? Like, what's going on here? And then eventually you kind of start piecing that together, and it's a little bit more fun, and it just creates a more natural party.
Yeah, and it makes the
Paladin, there's
quiet
levels of rogue.
moments. It makes the quiet moments of the game, like the sitting around the campfire kind of thing, actually have value, because now that's when you can be like, okay, guys, I gotta tell you something. I know we've been on the road for a while, but it's eating at me. I stole from the noblemen, and they're definitely on our tail. And everyone's like, what the heck? Like, it creates those moments. So.
Right. So I'm predicting that we're going to get some comments here on a couple of things. One, on particularly as it pertains to evil characters, and I think that I can predict a couple. One, people saying, yeah, people who want to play evil characters just use it as an excuse to be a jerk at the table, and they ruin the fun for everybody. And like, that's why I don't allow them at my table. Or I had this bad experience with someone who did that. And yeah, it was just an excuse for poor behavior. And I agree 100% with you guys. I think that if that's the motivation for, you know, picking an evil character, don't do it. It's going to ruin the experience for everyone, or at least sour it a little bit. When you talked, Corey, about the betrayal, I've read some horror stories, right, from people who were not the betrayer, because it was probably a lot of fun for them, right?
Yep.
But the betrayed, and how upset they were at the sort of this crucial moment in the game when something happened, and turns out one of their party members was this, and he backstabbed them all, and they TPK'd, and he ran off with like the eye of the ruby dragon and won, and laughed at everybody, and everyone was just like, that was the worst D&D campaign I've ever had in my life. So I would be curious, first of all, in the comments, if you've had experiences like that, let me know. And especially, actually, maybe even if they were kind of cool experiences, like, even though you might have been like, no way, but like, oh my gosh, that was so awesome. You know what I mean? Like,
so I've had two of these experiences that I feel I need to bring up now because we're talking about it. One in which I convinced a player to let me secretly possess them with Asmodeus, and he used the rest of the party to free him and a couple other of the dark gods that had been trapped away, right? And when that was revealed, and it was revealed that that character like stepped forward and totally destroyed this prison and let these things go, like, everybody was just so surprised. Not as surprised because 2 months earlier we had been playing an off game, and that same character betrayed the party with the other GM. And it led to a moment where I literally sat there stunned for a moment as the player's character ran away, and then I literally shouted that player character's name and went into like a full-on rage in character and it was a lot of fun. It was so much fun to be betrayed. It was amazing.
That's So I mean, I guess it probably depends a lot on who you're playing with, how good of friends you are, how long the campaign's been going on, what the end results of the betrayal were, if there's a chance for you to sort of get back at them, et cetera, et cetera.
And I think sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, as the DM, I think you have a delicate balance here to make sure you don't let the betrayer kind of overshadow the moment and be like the spotlight hog.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because then everyone feels kind of cheapened, like, well, what the heck, if it was all just building up for this person. So you got to kind of finesse that a little bit. And then I think there's like earned shock value versus just like, oh, look what happened, and everyone's like, oh, Dang it. That's not
All right. Well,
But like if
great.
there's little seeds that plant to it, or just some sort of buildup that people are maybe like, I think something's up,
Something fishy's going on.
something's
Yeah.
wrong. Like just
our
little
cleric
things, but
keeps poking these two people with questions, and then oh my god, he just killed one.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
yeah.
I
would
think you have to
say
earn it a little bit.
if I were to be a DM and someone approached, and I'm just speaking hypothetically here, of course, but I would think that if someone wanted to plan a betrayal, I would probably work with him on that, but then let them know if and when this happens, you are going to become the new big bad, and I am going to let your friends who you're playing this game with. It is not going to be the end of the game for them. They're going to get resurrected. If you end up killing them, there's going to be a cleric on hand to resurrect them, and now you're their target, and this campaign probably ends with them killing you. So as long as you're okay with that,
So
right, like, let's do it.
the way that I would handle it is I would say, okay, but after this betrayal, your character that you've been playing becomes an NPC for the villains, and you can come in with a brand new character, but I'm not going to let you keep running around in a separate campaign,
Right.
or come back to the party and try and, well, I mean, if you want to come back to the party and try and make amends, amends. But if you want to have this character go evil like that, well, then guess what? You're going to be played by me, because I'm the evil in the game, not you.
Yeah.
Like, you get to be the hero, so you can come in with somebody else.
Yeah, I like that. And this ended up going in a completely different direction than I had initially anticipated, but that's okay. I like that. So let me just wrap with one maybe final question. Do you guys have any additional suggestions, tips that maybe we haven't talked about so far, for how to use alignment in game, whether as a player or as a DM, to improve story or role play? One thing that I thought of, and hopefully I'm not stealing anyone's thunder, but using alignment as a DM, and more so in a way to sort of set apart maybe an NPC or a monster, right? Because I think, Corey, you were talking earlier about like, oh, all red dragons are chaotic evil, all kobolds are chaotic evil. It's like, well, why don't you make a kobold that's chaotic good?
Yeah.
And now suddenly you've got an interesting, potential NPC, right? Someone who left his pack and is trying to, forge a new path for themselves, but nobody trusts him because he's a kobold, and they all know all kobolds are chaotic evil. So he constantly has to prove himself that he's like a good kobold or whatever. I mean, it's
Drist but shittier.
Against the grain.
No, I like that, and actually, it's funny that you say that, because one of the characters that I have been developing for the campaign happens to be a kobold of a good alignment. Yeah, but I think that's a really good way to do it. And I think the one thing that I would tell people is evil doesn't mean that you just do whatever you want and be rude and a jerk.
Right.
Evil can mean a variety of different things. For example, I was playing a game where my character went from lawful neutral to lawful evil, like alignment shift because of a magic item. And it wasn't an immediate like, oh, let's burn the whole town down. It was a shift of, okay, instead of trying to help this town, how can I manipulate this town into giving me what I want instead, while still adhering to the law and helping them, and it's one of those things where it's like, you don't just have to be like, oh, I'm evil, that means I can do and say whatever I want. And it's like, no, you're going to get smited because of that.
Yeah. Anything else, Preston, Mr. Rogers? Any other tips or tricks, words of advice?
Yeah, I'd say if you're going to use alignment in game, as a player, I think it's a good fallback when you're unsure what to do. If there's a decision that's hard, and you as your player and your character you're having a hard time separating like what each one would do, that's when alignment would become helpful. And you could say, well, my character is chaotic, so I need to do the chaotic thing instead of saving the damsel in distress and being the good guy. Maybe I run away. Sure. Because I got to look out for myself. And so can help you in those situations where you're maybe not sure how to role play it. You can always fall back on your alignment.
So something to look to for guidance, not necessarily a firm law that you have to adhere to with every decision that you make.
And I'd say for me, the only word of advice that I would have is that alignment has nothing to do with intelligence. Just because someone's lawful evil or chaotic evil does not mean they can't be calculative, they can't be mastermind, they can't be very smart and cunning. And the same thing, if someone's lawful good, doesn't mean that they're going to blindly trust everyone, everywhere, always, and be gullible. So just use it as a gauge to say, okay, what's the temperature? How has my character progressed from point A to point B? As these traumatic experiences that in any campaign, that's essentially you got a bunch of trauma patients that are moving from place to place, PTSD, having those kind of conflicts. It's you're working through some stuff.
Yep.
Just keep that in mind. Don't use it as a
So beware of tropes and stereotypes and look for ways to
break them.
Yeah.
But Preston, everybody knows that good is dumb.
First, that's what I thought you were gonna say. I was like, aren't we all like trying to be good ultimately?
Honestly,
Guess we're all just dumb.
honestly, lawful good to me would be more paranoid of everybody, because they'd always be looking for like what's your motive? Does it go against the law? Does it go against the greater good? And all of that. So, but again, it's up to you. And I think that what Dallin said is the best. Let it be a guideline. Yeah. Let it just kind of nudge you in a certain direction, not determine what you do all the time.
Right. One last question that I wanted to ask, and this was actually Corey's idea. So Corey, why don't you go ahead, ask your question?
Oh yeah, okay. So what alignment do you see your guys as? Colby, what alignment are you?
I think I am somewhere between lawful good and chaotic good. I think that as some people know because they watch the Q&A, I am a religious person. I'm a man of faith, but I think most people who practice my religion would see me as chaotic. and I think that most people outside of my religion looking at me would think that I'm lawful. So I think I'm somewhere in between.
Okay. Preston.
Chaotic good.
Chaotic good? Yeah, I can see that.
I'll help and I'll do it, but usually it's just kind of like, if I'm there and I happen to be in the right place in the right time, I'll do it, but I'm not going to go out of my way to go.
Okay.
Something, I guess.
Mr. Rogers.
I think I'm chaotic good or true neutral, somewhere in between there. I don't know.
I
like to think we're all at least leaning towards good,
I
right?
like to be good, but I know I'm a little bit chaotic, and I sometimes put myself first, and I kind of have a temper, so I don't know. Put me in there. I don't know.
Yeah, and I classify myself as lawful good. No matter how much I try in Skyrim or any of these other games where you can make moral choices, I feel incredibly bad even in a video game. And no matter what I do, I always want to be the good guy. I want to be everybody's friend, and I feel like following the law and being a really good person helps with that.
To be the Sith Lord and KOTOR is impossible.
Yeah.
I forced myself to do it once, and I didn't sleep for days.
I don't even like declaring war in Civ, guys.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's the show for the week. Thank you to all of my DMs. Really appreciate having you guys. Thanks to everyone for watching. Love you guys. Hope you have a fantastic day, and we will see you soon.
Bye.